And that led to empathy toward Donald Trump and actually helped him garner more support for this election. But in regard to his speech, I think that what Trump does really well is he actually listens to the concerns of the American people. Polling for years indicated that the majority of Americans were concerned about inflation, concerned about undocumented immigration. And while the Democrats tend to think that this strategy of denying and pretending it doesn't happen or isn't happening is somehow a successful strategy.
Anna Kasparian just shattered expectations with a bold, on-air rebuke of the progressive movement, tearing into the Democratic Party's most glaring failures in a moment that could signal a major ideological shift. In a rare departure from left-wing orthodoxy, she slammed fellow progressives for turning their backs on working-class Americans while prioritizing abstract ideological battles. From surging inflation and a porous southern border to rising urban crime, Kasparian accused her political allies of obsessing over identity narratives while ignoring the basic needs of ordinary voters. Even more startling, she acknowledged that Donald Trump had tapped into those frustrations more effectively than her own party. The question now looms: is this a genuine awakening or a strategic distancing from a progressive agenda that's quickly losing popular traction? One thing is certain: this moment has triggered a broader reckoning on the American left.
About it and fair-minded, you would say actually Trump could be a pretty good guy. There's another side to him, which we all know, which can be more complicated. He trash talks people in a way that people don't like. He does stuff which winds people up, and so on and so on. And he has some policies which are awful, as all presidents do. How do you best describe him, Elizabeth, to people who don't really get him? You spend a lot of time around him. How do you see him?
There's a lot to unpack there. Number one, my apologies for the faces. My husband always says I don't have a poker face, and I guess that is coming out right now. Look, to start, I have spent quite a bit of time with Donald Trump. I think the best way to describe him is authentic, right? He's a real human being, and with that comes jokes you may not like. You may witness a few actions you don't like, but he's also real. He's honest. He tells the American people how he feels. He says it like it is, and despite what anyone thinks about him, the American people obviously disagree, right? Because he just became the president of the United States. So you can call him every name in the book, but millions of Americans obviously disagree and just decided he should be president of the United States. So I think that's where we can leave that. I think when it comes to claiming that Donald Trump is going to go after his political opponents, it's laughable considering what we just witnessed for the last few years, considering what I have seen on the sidelines happen to President Trump himself, happen to his family, who I know very well, happen to his staff, happen to people like me. I haven't talked about it. I've kept quiet waiting for today, right? Waiting for Donald Trump to get sworn in. But they went after me too. They went after my family too. This DOJ wanted to crush any opposition that they had because they were so terrified of Donald Trump being as popular as they knew that he was, and the moment that we all witnessed today, Donald Trump becoming president. Again, the fact is he stood there, said he would not go after his political opponents, was sworn in today in front of a crowd of people, many of which not only hoped that he would spend the remainder of his life in prison, but worked to make that happen. And he said he was not going to do the same thing to anyone else. You can lie about it all you want. That is not what he said. And I cannot wait for him to prove everybody wrong and be the president the American people deserve for the next 4 years.
He couldn't have been clearer. And honestly, Joe, the irony of saying that this was all something that Trump's best, when he's literally been the victim of this for the last year in the most unprecedented manner. When you take a president of the United States, I'm going to say this one more time, through a criminal court for the first time ever, that it's ever happened. And the reason you do it is because he may or may not have had a one-night stand with a porn star nearly 20 years ago and shuffled a bit of paper about it. It's a humiliating day for not just him and his family, but for America, for the American justice system, for the American presidential system. It was an absolute joke to drag Trump through a criminal court for such a pathetic and petty case like that. And if that had happened to a Democrat, by the way, you'd have all led the charge of how outrageous it was. Let me bring in Anna Kasparian on this. I mean, Anna, the sense I got watching Trump today is the sense I've got from speaking to him quite a lot in the last few months. I've had 5 or 6 conversations with him since he got shot. And I've definitely detected a man who is unbelievably grateful to be alive, that he genuinely understands that he came within half an inch of death, and very nearly happened again a few weeks later in the golf course, which was another appalling failure by the Secret Service. So he feels that very strongly, and I think that would affect any human being, anyone. But secondly, he feels the hand of history. He hasn't got a campaign anymore. All he's got left now is to deliver on his big promise.
Once a stalwart voice of progressive media through her role on The Young Turks, Anna Kasparian is no longer towing the ideological line. In fact, she's dismantling it. Her recent commentary has drawn attention and fire for its blistering critique of what she calls social justice theater, where symbolic politics have replaced tangible solutions. According to Kasparian, inflation, immigration, and crime are being sidelined by a left more interested in virtue signaling than policy. Her pivot places her in company with figures like Joe Rogan and Russell Brand, former left-leaning icons now disillusioned with their political peers. But critics are divided. Is Kasparian courageously speaking her truth or recalibrating to stay relevant in a shifting media and political landscape? Either way, the impact is unmistakable. She's not just airing frustration, she's highlighting a schism that could reshape Democratic messaging ahead of the 2024 election.
I mean, I hope your interpretation is correct. I mean, obviously, being the target of an assassination not once but twice is a traumatic situation to experience, and maybe it changed him to some extent. But I do want to just quickly go back to the points made in regard to the investigations. I really hope that Trump doesn't waste his time in his last term focusing on retaliation against his political opponents. So we're going to have to wait and see about that. I largely agree in regard to Alvin Bragg's prosecution of Donald Trump as it pertains to, his extramarital affairs with adult actresses. I like that you're giving him the benefit of the doubt, but don't be a cheeky little devil, you. Okay, you know that he had an affair. That's why the hush money payments were paid. But I think that investigation and prosecution really paled in comparison to the classified documents case and the attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election. I think the timing of the prosecution by Democrats in those two cases were very much political, and that led to empathy toward Donald Trump and actually helped him garner more support for this election. But in regard to his speech, I think that what Trump does really well is he actually listens to the concerns of the American people. Polling for years indicated that the majority of Americans were concerned about inflation, concerned about undocumented immigration. And while the Democrats tend to think that this strategy of denying and pretending it doesn't happen or isn't happening is somehow a successful strategy, he pays attention to what people are concerned about and he speaks to those issues. And I really hope that this is a teachable moment for the Democratic Party. So far, I've seen them refuse to take any personal responsibility for their failures and foibles.
I don't think they've learned, honestly. Yeah, honestly, and I don't see any evidence so far that Democrats have learned a damn thing. I really don't. I've been seeing some of the stuff you've been saying, which is the right way to go. And Cenk Uygur as well has been saying similar stuff, which is, look, you have to recognize what's happened here. And you have to understand American people just did not buy into anything that were being sold by the Democrats. In fact, they just moved in big numbers from all Democrats.
Love him or hate him, Donald Trump continues to dominate the political spotlight by zeroing in on the everyday concerns of average Americans. While Democrats focus on rhetoric, Trump speaks in blunt, often controversial terms about inflation, illegal immigration, and economic decline, topics that resonate with voters who feel forgotten by the political class. Despite facing a litany of legal challenges, including indictments and ongoing court battles, Trump has turned these moments into rallying cries. Rather than diminish his influence, the attacks have strengthened his image as a political outsider battling a corrupt establishment. What sets Trump apart is his raw, unscripted style in an era of polished political messaging. For many, he represents the only figure willing to name problems others ignore. Whether one supports his policies or not, his ability to connect with disenchanted voters continues to make him a formidable force in American politics.
Billy, I can imagine a lot of cheering around America when they heard that. Just a bit of clarity on such an absurd debate. Well, we got to a stage where you had the President of the United States and his Vice President, Biden and Harris, both endorsing the obviously grotesquely unfair scenario of biological males who identify as trans women competing in women's sport and then beginning to dominate women's sport in a way they never did when they competed against men. And that alone is someone like me, who's basically more liberal than not, pretty much a centrist. But it was so ridiculously...
As inflation strains household budgets, crime destabilizes cities, and the border remains in crisis, the Democratic Party appears fixated on issues that alienate working-class voters. Diversity mandates, gender politics, and cultural activism have become centerpieces of Democratic rhetoric, while practical concerns get overshadowed. Debates over topics like biological males in women's sports, seen by many as fringe concerns, have somehow become central to the party's platform. This disconnection is pushing away moderates, independents, and even longtime liberal voters. Hispanic communities, young men, and blue-collar workers are increasingly gravitating toward Trump, not necessarily out of admiration, but out of frustration. Voices like Anna Kasparian have urged the left to re-engage with real-world challenges, but their warnings are falling on deaf ears. If Democrats continue down this path, they may be handing Trump an electoral advantage in 2024 without even realizing it.